A black belt champion kicked a royal guard directly in the face, sending his bare skin cap flying. But when the ceremonial statue suddenly moved the martial artist's tournament, training couldn't save him from what came next. The crowd watched in stunned silence as years of arrogance met military reality. Now, before we continue, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. Also, make sure to check out our second channel Guard Patrol linked in the pinned comments, because we upload daily at the same time on both channels, so subscribe to both and never miss a powerful story. The dawn light cast long shadows across Buckingham Palace as tourists began to gather cameras ready to capture the iconic changing of the guard. Among them stood Chen, his designer tracksuit and confidence, swagger setting him apart from the crowd. At 32, Ryan had built his reputation as one of America's most decorated martial arts champions, with 3 international titles and a chain of elite dojo across California. His Instagram bio said, "It all undefeated, untouchable, unstoppable. This is what they call security." Ryan scoffed, eyeing the motionless royal guard standing at attention. He adjusted his custom Rolex, a gift from his latest sponsor in my world. A fighter who stands still is just asking to get knocked down. The 4 men surrounding Ryan, his training partners and devoted followers, nodded in agreement, their matching team jackets identifying them as members of Chen's elite combat system. They formed a protective semicircle around their leader, an instinctive formation developed through years of tournament competitions. "Remember Tokyo last year?" one of them said, grinning, "that Swedish champion who said he was unbeatable. Didn't last 40 seconds in the ring with you?" Ryan's eyes narrowed as he studied guard William Harrington, whose scarlet tunic and bare skin cap stood in stark contrast to the modern glass and steel of Ryan's fighting cage at 28. Harrington had served with distinction for 8 years, though. Nothing in his impassive expression revealed the 3 tours of duty in Afghanistan or the night operation in Syria that had earned him a quiet medal ceremony at the Ministry of Defense. "Look at that dance." Ryan muttered professional assessment, mixing with derision, completely vulnerable. No center of gravity, no defensive posture. He rolled his shoulders, the movement rippling through muscles honed by thousands of hours of training. All that ceremonial garbage would get him destroyed in a real fight. A few tourists nearby glanced nervously at Ryan's group, sensing the unmistakable energy of contained aggression among them. Colonel James Thornton, retired after 30 years of distinguished service with the Royal Marines, paused in his morning walk. His weathered face registered concern as he observed Ryan's demeanor, recognizing the telltale signs of a man looking for confrontation. "Let me show you what a real fighter looks like," Ryan announced, stepping closer to Harrington. The guard's eyes remained fixed. Forward, his disciplined stillness. A stark contrast to Ryan's fluid movement. See, a real fighter is always ready. Always moving, always aware. He demonstrated a defensive stance, his trained body shifting with practiced precision. Ryan began circling the guard, analyzing his form with the critical eye of a professional. "Look at this poor guy. They've trained all the fighting instinct out of him." He approached from different angles, deliberately entering Harrington's peripheral vision in a real combat situation. This level of rigidity gets you killed. Tourists had begun to gather, forming an impromptu semicircle. Some looked uncomfortable, others curious, a few. Entertained by the unexpected show, a family from Germany quietly ushered their children away, the parents exchanging knowing glances that spoke of disapproval. "You know what we're looking at here?" Ryan gestured to the guard as though presenting an exhibit. the difference between ceremony and combat. These guys are wasaidias da dinas babadao, ayadiao, asabedasan dao, asadadabrao, asanaya bao. Peyokaya naya nayam awayam abubel. Espedao and Mayer performing, not fighting, he executed a series of quick jabs that stopped just short of Harrington's face, demonstrating his control. Every move I make is designed for one purpose. Victory Colonel Thornton had moved closer. Now his military bearing evident despite his civilian clothes, the medals pinned discreetly on his lapel caught the morning light decorations that spoke of real battle, fought and real sacrifices made. His expression remained neutral, but his eyes never left Ryan's increasingly aggressive display. "Ladies and gentlemen," Ryan called out, assuming the role of an impromptu ringside announcer. "What you're witnessing is the fundamental difference between British tradition and actual combat effectiveness." He gestured toward Harrington with a theatrical sweep of his arm. These guards represent a bygone era when standing in formation was considered military prowess, Ryan's training. Partners had positioned themselves strategically around the guard, forming what martial arts practitioners would recognize as a demonstration circle. Their matching jackets created a visual barrier that separated Harrington from the rest of the crowd, turning the public space into an improvised arena. "This is Jin." Ryan gestured to the tallest of his entourage, a man with a stoic expression and hands wrapped in professional grade, tape three-time international kickboxing champion, and Marcus. Here he nodded toward a compact, muscular man with a fighter's cauliflower ear, former welterweight MMA title holder. "We train fighters who win actual combat sports, not ceremonial soldiers who win costume contests." The crowd had grown larger, now drawn by the spectacle of Ryan's impromptu demonstration. A British family near the back exchanged glances of clear discomfort, the father placing protective hands on his children's shoulders. An elderly woman with a veteran's pin visible on her coat shook her head in quiet disapproval. "Watch how a real fighter moves." Ryan instructed, executing a series of lightning-fast punches that stopped mere inches from Harrington's torso. Every movement has purpose, intent, lethal potential, nothing wasted, nothing for show. This is fighting efficiency developed through thousands of hours, facing actual opponents, not standing at attention. Colonel Thornton had begun making his way through the crowd, his military bearing parting the onlookers with quiet authority. His face betrayed concern, not for Harrington's safety, but for what mightn't happen if the guard was forced to break protocol. "You see the problem with military training." Ryan projected his voice like a seminar leader, "is that it's designed for group thinking. Follow orders, maintain formation, sacrifice, individuality." He circled Harrington, analyzing his posture with professional scrutiny. "Martial arts is about achieving personal excellence, about pushing human capabilities to their absolute limit." Ryan executed a spinning kick that whistled past Harrington's ear, close enough that the guard would have felt the displacement of air. The crowd gasped, several people taking involuntary steps backward. "Notice, he doesn't even blink," Ryan said with mock admiration. "That's not discipline, folks, that's fear. The fear of breaking rules, of thinking independently." He positioned himself directly in front of Harrington, hands on hips, studying the guard's impassive face in my dojo. "I teach people to overcome that fear, to react, to engage with reality." A woman with a young daughter pulled the child away from the scene, murmuring, "This is disrespectful." Where leaving several others followed their example, uncomfortable with the escalating tension. I think we need a practical demonstration. Ryan announced, his voice carrying the practiced authority of a man accustomed to commanding attention in competition. Ring's theory is fine, but nothing teaches like experience. He adjusted his stance, the movement fluid and purposeful. Ladies and gentlemen, I am going to show you why static defense, the kind these guards represent, is fundamentally obsolete. Colonel Thornton moved forward with urgent purpose now. But Ryan's training. Partners closed ranks, creating a human barrier between the retired officer and their leader. One of them, a heavy-set man with a fighter's broken nose, placed a hand on Thornton's chest, let the demonstration finish, old-timer. He said, his tone conversational, but his intent unmistakable educational purposes. Thornton's eyes narrowed. That guard is not what you think he is, he said quietly. Your friend is making a serious mistake. Ryan had begun a meticulous warm-up routine, stretching his shoulders and neck with practiced deficiency, the most dangerous delusion in combat sports, he lectured. Rotating his wrists is believing that tradition equals effectiveness. These guards stand here looking impressive, but they've sacrificed practical skills for ceremony now. For my final demonstration, Ryan announced, his voice taking on the quality of a ringside announcer, I'm going to show you exactly why this type of static defense fails against modern combat techniques. He moved into position, his stance shifting subtly into what trained fighters would recognize as a competition-ready posture in a real combat situation. Maintaining situational awareness is critical. This guard has surrendered his awareness to ceremony. Ryan began a complex approach sequence, the kind used to set up championship-winning strikes. His training has made him vulnerable, not strong. The crowd had fallen completely silent now. Sensing that a line was about to be crossed, several people had backed away, while others seemed frozen in place, unable to look away from the impending collision, a defender who won't adapt. Ryan declared his movements accelerating, who can't respond to changing conditions, who remains rigidly committed to outdated protocols. He launched into a blindingly fast combination, each move flowing into the next with years of practiced precision. The final move was a spinning heel kick aimed directly at Harrington's face. The impact was audible, a sharp crack that cut through the morning air like a gunshot. Ryan's foot connected solidly with the side of Harrington's face, sending the bare skin cap flying in a dramatic arc against the blue London sky. The force of the blow would have felled most men instantly. But somehow, impossibly, Harrington retained his footing. A collective gasp rose from the crowd, followed by absolute silence. Time seemed to stretch and slow, each second extending into an eternity, as the bare skin cap completed its arc and landed on the courtyard stones with a muffled thud. Ryan recovered his balance with practiced efficiency, a triumphant smile beginning to form on his lips, and that he announced to the stunned audience is why his words died in his throat as he registered what was happening before him. Harrington hadn't fallen. Hadn't staggered, his head had snapped sideways with the impact, but his body had absorbed the blow with the resilience of someone who had endured far worse. A thin line of blood traced its way down from his temple, but his eyes, now locked directly onto Ryan's for the first time, showed no pain, no fear. Only a cold, focused clarity that experienced combatants would recognize immediately. Oh, one of Ryan's entourage whispered, the bravado evaporating from his voice. For a heartbeat, nothing moved. The crowd held its collective breath. Colonel Thornton had stopped speaking into his phone, his expression shifting from concern to something closer to grim anticipation. Then Harrington moved. It wasn't the clumsy response of a ceremonial figure unaccustomed to actual combat. It was the precise, economical motion of a predator who had stalked targets through mountain passes and urban conflict zones. His ceremonial rifle clattered to the stones as Harrington closed the distance between himself and Ryan, with a speed that bellied his formal attire. Ryan, to his credit, recognized the danger instantly and shifted into a defensive stance. "Now we're talking," he said, but the confidence in his voice had hollowed. "Let's see what they actually teach you soldiers." The guards. First strike. Interrupted. Ryan's taunt with brutal efficiency. It wasn't showy or dramatic, just a textbook, perfect combat move, delivered with the force of someone who had applied such techniques in life-or-death situations. Ryan blocked instinctively, his trained reflexes responding before brain could process what was happening, but the impact still sent him staggering backward. The guard didn't speak, didn't posture, didn't play to the crowd. He moved with the focused intensity of someone executing a mission parameter rather than performing for spectators. His expression remained professionally neutral, even as he systematically dismantled the martial artist's defenses with clinical precision. Ryan attempted a counterattack, launching a kick that had won him tournaments across 3 continents. Harrington caught the leg in midair and, with one decisive motion, took the champion to the ground. The impact knocked the wind from Ryan's lungs, his eyes widening with the sudden, humbling recognition that he was drastically outmatched. Guard Harrington maintained his position, one knee precisely placed on Ryan's sternum, enough pressure to immobilize but not injure the martial artist's surprise had given way to a competitor's instinct to counter. But each attempt to regain advantage was met with subtle adjustments that rendered his extensive training ineffective. "Stay down." Harrington spoke for the first time, his voice carrying the quiet authority of command rather than the anger of someone who'd been assaulted. "This ends now." Colonel Thornton stepped forward, Ryan's entourage no longer attempting to block his approach. I believe he addressed the martial artist with military precision. "You've just received a practical education in the difference between performing combat and experiencing it." Ryan struggled ineffectively against Harrington's hold. "What the hell, you can't guard? Harrington can do considerably more than he's currently demonstrating." Thornton cut him off, his tone conversational, yet edged with steel before his assignment. To the Queen's Guard, he served with the Special Reconnaissance Regiment, 4 combat deployments, 2 distinguished service commendations. He paused, allowing the information to sink in. "The ceremonial duties you've been mocking require the highest levels of discipline from soldiers who've already proven themselves in actual combat." The crowd had reformed at a safer distance, their expressions a mixture of shock and dawning understanding. Palace security personnel were approaching rapidly across the courtyard. There, radios crackling with urgent communications. SRR. One of Ryan's training partners repeated his previous bravado, completely evaporated. "Those guys are not to be trifled with." Thornton finished for him quite right. Harrington maintained his position, his breathing controlled, and even despite the exertion of the brief confrontation, the thin line of blood from Ryan's kick had traced a path down his cheek, but his expression remained professionally detached. The same focus he'd maintained during night operations in environments far more dangerous than this palace courtyard. Every guard standing ceremonial duty, Thornton continued addressing not just Ryan, but the gathered tourists, is an active duty soldier with extensive combat training, and in many cases battlefield experience the discipline you mistook for weakness. Mr. Chen is the same discipline that keeps them effective in situations where your tournament training would prove fatally inadequate. Ryan had stopped struggling a new awareness. Dawning in his eyes, he moved, like I didn't expect, no. You wouldn't have. Thornton nodded. Competition, fighting, and combat operations develop entirely different skill sets. Your techniques are impressive in controlled environments. With rules and referees, Guard Harrington are effective in environments where the consequences of failure aren't measured in lost points. Palace security had arrived now, surrounding the scene with professional efficiency, their commander assessing the situation at a glance. Approached Colonel Thornton with respectful recognition. "Colonel Sir Wick." "Take it from here." Thornton nodded. "I believe Guard Harrington has the situation well in hand, Lieutenant. Mr. Chen here decided to test the reflexes of the Queen's Guard in a rather direct fashion." The security officer's expression hardened as he took in the scene, the bare skin cap still lying on the stones. The thin streak of blood on Harrington's face. "I see that's a serious offense, sir." "Indeed it is." Thornton agreed. Assault on a serving member of His Majesty's forces, disruption of ceremonial duties, and I suspect several other charges that the Crown Prosecution Service will enumerate with their characteristic thoroughness. Harrington looked to his commanding officer for instruction. At a subtle nod, he released his hold on Ryan, rising to his feet with the same fluid precision that had characterized his response. He stepped back, resuming a posture of parade ground attention. Despite the absence of his bare skin cap, the tourists had formed a respectful semicircle around Colonel Thornton, their cameras forgotten as they absorbed the reality of what they had witnessed. The retired officer stood with parade ground precision. Despite his civilian clothes, his bearing that of a man accustomed to explaining difficult truths. With clarity, the uniform these guards wear. He gestured toward Harrington, who had resumed his post with perfect composure. Despite the thin line of blood still visible on his cheek, represents far more than ceremonial tradition. It is earned through the same rigorous training that produces our nation's combat forces. An American tourist raised his hand tentatively. But why have them just standing there if they're actual soldiers? Seems like a waste of training. Thornton's smile held patient understanding, an interesting question that reveals a common misconception. These ceremonial duties rotate among active duty units. The soldier standing guard today might have been conducting counterterrorism operations 6 months ago and may deploy to a conflict zone 6 months from now. He gestured toward Harrington with respectful acknowledgement. Their ceremonial stillness isn't their defining capability. It's simply one expression of the discipline that makes them effective in all aspects of their service. The security officer who had taken custody of Ryan returned, approaching Thornton with professional courtesy. "Colonel Mr. Chen is being processed for formal charges given the public nature of the incident and the injury to Guard Harrington. The charges are quite serious." Thornton nodded, as they should be assaulting a serviceman on duty. "Is not a matter. The Crown takes lightly. He's requesting to speak with Guard Harrington." The officer added his tone neutral, but his expression skeptical, says he wants to apologize properly. Thornton glanced toward Harrington, who gave an almost imperceptible nod, despite maintaining his forward gaze. "I believe that can be arranged once his duty shift concludes." Thornton. Thornton responded, "Though I suspect Guard Harrington commanding officer will have the final word on that matter." What Mr. Chen failed to understand, what many civilians understandably don't recognize, is that military excellence isn't measured by the same metrics as competitive sports and competition. The goal is to demonstrate superior technique within established rules in military service. The goal is effective. Mission completion, often under conditions where rules are secondary to survival. He gestured to Harrington's immaculate uniform, now slightly marred by the confrontation. The discipline you see in these guards, the ability to stand motionless for hours to maintain perfect composure regardless of provocation, that's not separate from their combat training. It's an extension of it. The same mental control that allows a soldier to remain still under tourist harassment is what allows them to remain calm under enemy fire. A young woman at the front of the crowd spoke up. Her accent, marking her as local. But why didn't he respond sooner? He just took that kick to the face without moving. An excellent question. Thornton replied, "Military protocol establishes clear parameters for when a guard may break ceremony and respond to a threat. They are trained to exercise maximum restraint to distinguish between irritating behavior and genuine danger." His explanation carried the weight of someone who had both followed and issued such orders. Guard Harrington demonstrated that restraint perfectly. He responded only when directly assaulted. And even then his response was precisely calibrated to neutralize rather than harm a palace staff member approached, carrying a first aid kit. After a brief exchange with Thornton, she moved toward Harrington, who maintained his position, as she carefully cleaned the blood from his face. The guard's eyes remained fixed forward throughout the process, his discipline unbroken even during this necessary intervention to stand guard at these posts. Thornton continued once the staff member had finished is considered. One of the highest honors in military service, these men are selected not just for their ceremonial precision, but for their exemplary service records. The beck and cap and scarlet tunic aren't costumes, they're recognition of excellence. He smiled slightly, a rare break in his formal demeanor if Mr. Chen had bothered to research. Before his demonstration, he might have discovered that many of these guards have combat decorations that would fill a display case far more impressive than any tournament trophy cabinet as afternoon shadows lengthened across Buckingham Palace's courtyard guard. William Harrington emerged from the guard quarters in his standard combat uniform rather than ceremonial dress. The military physician had thoroughly examined the impact site, noting with professional approval Harrington's instinctive reaction that had turned what could have been a jaw-breaking blow into a glancing impact. "You rolled with it perfectly," the doctor had commented while applying antiseptic to the cut textbook. Defensive reaction. Harrington had merely nodded. The instinct to minimize impact damage had been drilled into him during countless hours of close-quarters combat training that emphasized survival over spectacle, efficiency over showmanship. The medical assessment had confirmed what he already knew. No significant injury from Ryan's kick, just superficial bruising that would fade within days. He'd endured far worse in training exercises, let alone combat deployments in regions whose names rarely appeared in news reports inside the security office. Chen sat alone. His design tracksuit now rumpled, his championship confidence deflated by the reality of criminal charges and the humbling experience of being so thoroughly outmatched. When Harrington entered, Ryan stood immediately, his body language communicating a respect entirely absent from their earlier encounter. Guard Harrington, the security officer, nodded. "Mr. Chen has been formally charged, but he requested this conversation before processing." Continues. Harrington's nod was professional, neither friendly nor hostile. "Understood. I'll be right outside," the officer added, stepping out and closing the door behind him for a moment. The two men regarded each other in silence, the martial arts champion and the soldier, each recognizing something in the other that had been obscured by their roles and Ryan's assumptions. That was SRR training, wasn't it? Ryan finally asked, his voice quieter than before, the performance-formative quality gone. "I've trained with special forces. Guys from 3 countries. Never seen anything quite like what you did." We adapt techniques to operational requirements. Harrington replied simply, neither confirming nor denying the specifics of his military background. Ryan's laugh held no humor. Operational requirements, right? He gestured to the chair opposite him. Mind if we talk for a minute man to man? Harrington took the offered seat. His posture military straight even in this informal setting. I'm listening. I screwed up. Ryan admitted bluntly. Completely misjudged what I was looking at when I saw you standing there. I saw he hesitated, searching for words, a target. Harrington finished for him, not a fellow professional. Ryan nodded, genuine regret. Crossing his face. That's exactly it in my world. Everything's about demonstrating superiority, proving you're the best. He looked down at his hands, the hands that had won championships but had proven ineffective against Harrington's disciplined response. I didn't understand what I was actually looking at. Few civilians do. Harrington replied, his voice neutral but not unkind. That's by design, the stillness, Ryan said, looking up again. I thought it was just ceremony, just tradition, but it's actually control. Harrington finished the same control that allows us to stand motionless for hours, allows us to make split-second decisions. Under fire without panicking. Ryan nodded, slowly, processing this revelation in competition. Everything I do is designed to be seen to impress judges and spectators. What you did. He shook his head. There was nothing showy about it, just effective different training for different purposes. Harrington said, echoing Colonel Thornton's earlier assessment, my job isn't to win points or impress audiences. It's to complete objectives and protect lives. They're going to make an example of me, aren't they? Ryan asked, glancing toward the door where the security officer waited. Likely. Harrington confirmed, without emotion. Assaulting a guard on duty is taken very seriously. Ryan accepted this with surprising composure. Fair enough, I earned whatever comes next. He straightened in his chair, making a visible effort to face his situation with dignity for what it's worth. I'm sorry, not just for the kick, but for the disrespect before that. For not recognizing what was in front of me. Harrington studied him for a moment, assessing the sincerity of the apology. Whatever he saw apparently satisfied him because he gave a single precise nod. Acknowledged. As he stood to leave, Ryan spoke again. One last question. When I kicked you, most men would have gone down, or at least staggered. You barely moved. How Harrington paused at the door. His expression unchanging, but something almost like professional respect entering his voice. When you've had real IEDs detonate nearby, a kick to the face is just another Tuesday he left without waiting for a response, returning to his unit and his duties with the same disciplined precision that had characterized his entire response to the incident behind. Chen remained seated faced with the humbling realization that there were different kinds of strength in the world, and that he had only mastered one of the lesser varieties. Back at his post the following day, Guard Harrington stood at attention. His bearskin cap restored his uniform. Immaculate, no trace remained of the previous day's confrontation, but tourists who approached now did so with a new respect, their cameras more discreet, their admiration more genuine. Colonel Thornton, passing by during his morning walk, paused to observe the guard and the respectful distance maintained by the visitors. He smiled slightly, nodding in satisfaction before continuing on his way. Sometimes he reflected the most effective lessons about respect weren't taught through words, but through demonstrations that revealed the truth behind appearances. What would you have done in Ryan's situation? Would you have seen past the ceremonial uniform to recognize the combat veteran beneath, or would you, like many have mistaken, stillness for weakness. Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video. If you learned something new about the Royal Guards, subscribe to our channel for more stories that reveal the truth behind ceremonial traditions. And hit that bell icon to be notified when we upload our next video. Make sure to check out our previous videos appearing on your screen right now. And we'll see you again tomorrow. As a dasambi, sabe se. Omen diesors dietes andase biamin banimio. Awedo in den saf. Bajos barbade caselies. Besamantine o roban mani me in bendia.